A-Team is probably one of the best shows to really exemplify that from a perspective. I mean, you've got B.A. Baracus or whatever, who's the muscle. You've got, that other guy, Maverick or whatever, I forget what his name was the tech guy. You've got Face. Shaun, I'm so happy to have you on the show, buddy. It is great to talk to another person who, number one, appreciates a good scuffle, loves the idea of jiu-jitsu, loves the idea of self-defense, and but you take it to the next level. You see, I only roll on the mats, you roll in the field, and that's a little bit more of a situation. So welcome to the show, brother.
Yes, thanks, Steve. Great to be here. It's been a long time since I've had a scuffle, thankfully.
Yeah.
In my previous life, it was all about threat avoidance as opposed to getting to the point where it gets to the point of having a scuffle, right?
Well, that actually brings up a really good point. I think that a lot of times when people think you're going to get into a security detail, that the first thing is you're just taking everybody down. And that just doesn't seem to be the case, in our conversations.
Absolutely not. I mean, if once it gets to that point, I mean, there's things that'll happen where you may have to use that force or them skills that you've learned. But generally, operating as a bodyguard, it's all about threat avoidance. And if it gets to the point where you need to use them other skills, then maybe you haven't done your job correctly or you've missed something. And of course, there's, many anomalies to the side of that.
Yeah, and I guess that all goes down to that tactical planning. Because, I mean, if you have a high value resource or asset moving from point A to point B and you need to make sure that it's secure, what are some of the things that you would do to plan out that route to make sure that is a secure process?
It's like having a business, right? It's, from point A to point B, it's like having them goals. Where do you need to get to? Where do you want to be? And what resources do you have to get there? How many vehicles do we need to get that principle to that place? What's the obstacles in the way of getting there, at that event? What are the obstacles there? Who's controlling access? Who's doing all of these things? Do we know the route in, safe routes out, all of that sort of thing? Running a business and setting them goals and things you want to achieve, just creating that mission, right? I think goals sometimes sounds too weak because everyone has a goal. As soon as you get a little bit uncomfortable, it's like, we can do that next year. But when you make it a mission and you have to achieve that goal or achieve that mission, I think it becomes a little bit stronger. Your language means a lot.
I think that language is really important around that. A lot of times goals are set and they're not achieved. And then people go, well, I'll just hit my goal tomorrow. And I always go by the idea that standards aren't what you set. Standards are what you accept. And if you accept anything less than your standard, then that's your new standard. And I think when you go to that mission critical mindset is that you're running a mission and the only mission is to succeed, and full stop.
I really like that because that's how I've set my life out. I was a British paratrooper and, becoming a paratrooper is very hard. If it was just a goal to become one, then times when it got really hard, maybe just like, maybe I can do it next year. But when it's a mission and you're going to achieve it, then it's a very different mindset. And when I became a bodyguard, it was exactly the same. This is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to do it. And that's the mindset that I feel we have to take it out of business as well. You don't set up a business to fail. So go in with that strong mission mindset. How are you going to achieve them things that you want to achieve? And then it becomes a lot stronger.
Now let's look at one of the examples. So let's play the bodyguard example out. And, I think there was a famous movie called The Bodyguard. So let's see how truthful some of these things are. What does it typically look like? What were they trying to achieve? Where are they trying to go? Who are these people? And what is a normal day in the life of a bodyguard look?
It's really interesting, actually. It's certainly not Hollywood, how it's depicted in things like The Bodyguard. I remember my very first day of bodyguard training. I remember we turned up from the airport because I'd done the course in South Africa, and we turned up. I had jeans and regular clothes on, and there was a fitness test at the start of the course. You presume when you turn up, right? We're getting introduced, filling in the paperwork, and they'd say, right, now go and get changed because we're going to do this fitness test. I remember we filled in the paperwork, and he goes, right, outside. We're all outside. Then we get set off on this, like a mile route that you had to do, and there's the press up, whatever the test was at the time. I remember thinking, we're not getting changed for this. I remember straight, he said, when something happens in real life, you don't get the chance to put your shorts on. You have to operate in the way that, and it just set the tone from day one, and it was like, got you in a real good frame of mindset. And things like the
Yeah,
body
the
ones,
frame of
yes.
mindset around that, I think you hear this a lot of time from a business acumen standpoint is, don't ever be getting ready, always be ready.
Mm-hmm.
And, then, you don't have to waste time when that moment hits. And that sort of, I think, is very akin to that.
Yeah, because it's like oh, the rabbit in the headlights situation, right? Do you a fight, flight, or freeze? If you aren't ready, you aren't prepped. If you're not in that, we call it code yellow, you're aware of things that could happen. It's just easier to maneuver and, find a different way to achieve what you're trying to achieve. But if you're completely blissfully unaware and something hits your business or your life, whatever it is, it's going to hit you a lot harder.
So you're doing a run, you're doing obstacles, you're wearing your Levi's jeans and button-up shirt, and hopefully not too many stains on it at the end. And then what happens next? What is the next part of the training that you go through?
God, the first week was all about, it was medical training. Actually, it was really well known because I did it in Cape Town, South Africa. And another good lesson there, by doing the training out there and taking myself out of the comfort zone of where I lived in the UK, was really key, because doing the training during that first week, I remember that they run ambulance shifts as well. So during your training, you go out with the paramedics, attending to real life situations. So, if your principal gets hit, we need to keep them alive as well, right? And you can learn everything in a classroom. There's nothing better than getting real, hands-on in real life. And I remember one of the first calls that we had, there was someone who'd been stabbed 7 times. And I remember me and the guy that I was on the course with, we turned up and we had the big paramedic bags. And I just presumed that, we're going to watch these paramedics going in, we're taking the experience, we're giving them the kit. I remember we turned up at the incident and they went, right, crack on. And we're like, wow, and the only time they stop you is if you're going to do something that would endanger that person's life or, or cause harm. And really, when you can do that, get the hands on, plug in the whole, all of that sort of thing, that's when you really learn them lessons really click in, because you're actually doing it and you're seeing the pressure required, the what's causing pain, what's not, and getting that real hands on. There's just nothing like that.
Yeah, my wife was a paramedic for about 15 years, and I always do believe that being a paramedic is one of the toughest jobs on the planet, because you're going to moments where people are in the worst moments of their life. Typically, they're not inviting you to the birthday party unless something went wrong, and you're showing up to help them for a moment, not for a full management of the system, but you're just there for this little moment. And you just got to get them from point A to point B and in the best way possible, in the safest way possible. But really, you're dealing with massive trauma every single day, every single day. And it's one of the toughest jobs, because then you finish that day of trauma and you go home and sit on the couch with the kids and you got to process it. It's one of the hardest jobs you can possibly do.
Yeah, and it can really impact some people, right? Because not everybody handles it in the same way. And it's like being a soldier. You can train for these, train for different scenarios, but until, I guess, bullets start coming the opposite way, that's when you find out really, what you have in you. And you'll find a lot of time, there's a lot of, guys who can talk a big fight or something, but when the rounds come down, it's very different, because it's not a training scenario. Then you can really lose your life, you can lose limbs, all of that sort of thing. And it is, it
Yeah,
is mindset.
100% mindset. I think for a fight or a difficult situation, even sales, it doesn't really matter what the environment is. The mindset is so critically important, because most people, they go out and they take all these big fancy training courses, and they learn all these fancy techniques, and then when it comes time to implement them, in that moment when the stress level starts to go up, and then to the degree that you are stressed is the degree of how low you're working on your level of technique. Is the greater the degree of stress, the lower you are going to perform on your level of technique. So the easiest way, in my opinion, always to increase your skill in the moment of duress is reduce your stress. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the great things, right, is like Tony Robbins, when he says, where focus goes, energy flows. So if you're going to, whatever you're going to do, if you're going to go and do a big talk in front of, 1,000 people, and if you're sitting there before you go out, And I used to have this terrible fear of public speaking. And if you stand there before and going, this is going to go wrong, I'm going to forget my words, I'm going to forget my line, I'm going to, guess what happens when you go out there? You forget your lines, you forget your words, right?
Yep.
If you completely turn that upside down, go, actually, I'm going to go out there and this is an amazing opportunity. I'm going to deliver this value to all of these people. Then you start having a different conversation. You have a different outcome. And that's no different. Like you say, training under duress. You need to put yourself in that scenario, go practice it in front of people.
Well, that's why I love podcasting when you talk about public speaking. I think so many people have this massive fear of getting on a stage. I was just on a stage this weekend in front of 1,000 people, and it didn't faze me one bit.
Mm-hmm.
And, put me back 3 years ago, I'd probably be nervous. I'd be practicing 8 times a week or 8 times a day, rather, leading up to it, just to make sure that everything was perfect. And then walking the room and doing all this other stuff, where I just got on the stage and I just talked. And the reason being is because I've just done it so many times through podcasting that I'm on a digital stage. But so what? There's a bunch of people sitting out there. It's the same darn thing as the internet. There's a bunch of people sitting out there. And as soon as you realize that, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, it's just about reframing it, right? I remember someone saying to me, tell me something you're good at. Say it was you and you jiu-jitsu, for instance. Why are you good at it? Because you practice it, you train, you do it, you roll with people at different skill levels. You've done it 100 times. It makes you better each time you do it. So if you've got to talk like you're going to deliver in front of 1,000 people, what you have to do? You have to go and do that, right? Deliver it, feel it. And the more time you do it, the better you become. It's not rocket science.
Well, you got to feel failure too. Yesterday I was at the gym. I had been training for about a week because I'd been on the road. And so I got back to the gym and I'm 49, so I'm not a spring chicken. It takes me a little bit to recover. And so I'm going to play a very sort of coy, safe game to make sure that my back's protected, to make sure my knee is protected, to make sure I don't overextend for, getting, tennis elbow or golfer elbow, like all the crap that happens as you get older. I have to play this sort of defensive game, let alone play jiu-jitsu. And I got murked last night. I did not do well. I just, it didn't, I got tapped a bunch of times and whatever. And I'm totally comfortable with that because I know it's just like one moment. And I know next day when I go to the gym and now my back is going to feel a little bit better. Now my knee is going to feel a little more excited because I've got a little bit of exercise now. I'll go and murk them all again. And so it's just a matter of that. I'm okay to lose because I know I'm winning in the long game.
Yeah, it's not losing, right? You're learning,
Yeah. Well, I was protecting my back.
Next time, right, I have to defend that or I have to do something different. And
yeah,
no different in business.
Yeah, when we look at the idea of goals and missions and tactics and all these other things, I think there's a lot of people out there who really work at the very lofty level of, you start with why, like Simon Sinek, which I think is a great book. But I find the biggest challenge in most people has nothing to do with that level. Most people is they're like, and they consume it. And they consume it. But they actually never turn it into a mission. They never turn it into actual practical action that moves their day forward. You get into this stall moment. And I know one of the things that's really important for you is that making mission practical. In other words, getting it so that they're actually going to get into action and doing something. And I really want to hone in on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Many people, I'm, a serial learner as well. I like to learn and absorb content and learn all the time. But that content is no good if you're not implementing, right? And I work with a lot of business owners and they start a business, but they don't know how to take it forward. They might say they've been in business 20 years, but really they've been in business 1 year because they keep reliving the same year time after time after time. Mm-hmm. And they don't know how to change things up until you speak to them and say, right, what are the levers that are going to move your business forward? What are the critical actions that we can do now? We need to increase leads. We need to get better at whatever it is, whatever their model is. Is it discovery calls? Is it what are they selling? And it's finding the critical actions that will move them forward. The revenue generating actions and focusing on them. Everything else is noise. Let's work on them revenue generating critical actions and then hold people accountable within the team. So every week when you're having a team meeting, Steve, what have you done this week that's going to take our company towards them goals or that mission that you've set out at the start of the year? And it's having that and holding people accountable that will actually start taking you forward.
And I'm wondering, when you look at, as you talk about protecting the principal, or that high value asset, and where that is something very tactical, as in like you can touch it sort of thing, versus we want to hit a revenue goal of 10 million this month. And that sort of ethereal kind of moment. And where one feels like, yes, we definitely have to do this. How do we help somebody get into that mindset that no, they both have the same level of focus requirement to make that mission happen? There is no failure.
I think it's people have all these different mnemonics, SMART goals, whatever it is. But I think when you're getting specific, getting the client from A to B by this time, in this time frame, or hitting the 10 million, how do we hit the 10 million? And it's breaking that down to them little chunks, right? We're going to exit we're going to exit at this time. We're going to go in these vehicles. These are the team members that are in the team. These are the timing from this part to this part, and kind of drawing that out. So if you want to make the $10 million or whatever it is, what are you making currently? How can we increase that from 8 million to 10 million? What are the levers we can, twist? We need to, retain more of our clients and add, because it's about retention as well as adding, and it's just breaking that down and focusing on them things. We need to sell X amount of this product and getting specific on it. If we sell 100 of them, that's going to generate us £300,000. So we need to sell 200 of them, 100 of them, whatever it is, and then, driving campaigns and actions towards their metrics. Because then you can draw it out and say it.
Yeah, and I think metrics are so critical. And I think systems and models are very critical. I think a lot of people, they'll hire for talent, but they won't train or support that talent, especially with good systems, good models. And to be honest, good technology. I mean, how many times when you look at what you were doing from a security detail perspective, did technology make a difference?
Certainly with the protection of assets, it was a huge thing. You've got the people, processes, protocols, so tying all of them things in, and the technology, having the cameras. Then what happens if someone triggers the camera? Then you've got to have a process or a protocol which people implement the standard operating procedures, because there's always a point of failure somewhere. So you need to have that, what you got, like a concentric bubble, where everything's going to overlap and work. Like you say, in business, exactly the same. Systems and processes are everything. If you're running a business off a WhatsApp group, what happens when you're ill and you feel you don't have a business, you've got a job or you've got a hobby, right? You've got to, for Steve to run his business, it needs to be able to be operated by someone else when you're not around, or you've got nothing to sell. So I think when you're building any business, you should think of it as like a franchise model. Would someone buy this? Do I have an asset? Because if everything's in your mind, in your head, you don't have anything. You have a job.
Well, that makes it so hard when you're trying to, I run a detail for security, for example. If it was just a detail of one, you've got a long road to go down. You've got all these different neighborhoods to go through. You got all these different points of egress, what is it, ingress or egress?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember Homeland to see if I can remember ways of way that security detail works. And so you got all these things on the go. You can't do that with one person. It's got to be something that is done with multiple people. And that goes down to having a good communication with the people that you're working with.
It's having communication. It's having trust. It's running my business. If I said, I need 10 of me, that would be terrible, because 10 of me would all have the same knowledge, skills and ability, right? I want people who have got complementary skills to me, people that are strong where I'm weak, and it's kind of knitting that together and creating the team. Because if you have 10 of the same people, I'm a paratrooper, or I was a paratrooper, and we're terrible for it because we believe we're head and shoulders above every other unit. That was drilled into us. That was the mindset, and whatever we want to achieve, we'll make it happen. But when I used to operate in Iraq, Afghanistan, all of that, if you've got a team full of paratroopers and something happens with the vehicle goes down or something like that, it's great to have a mechanic or somebody who's skilled in fixing vehicles, paramedic in the team, all of that sort of thing. So you need them, have the trust in the other team members, people that bring them complementary skills that maybe on your strong point.
A-Team is probably one of the best
Yeah,
shows to really exemplify that from a perspective. I mean, you've got B.A. Baracus
absolutely.
or whatever, who's the muscle. You've got, that other guy, Maverick or whatever, I forget what his name was the tech guy. You've got Face.
Yes.
I don't really know what his job was other than just to like flirt with the ladies. And then you've got, the guy who had the cigar, who was just really the brains of the operation. And I think there's a couple other people, but each one of them had a
Yeah.
different role
Yeah.
within the framework of them succeeding. And what do you do if one of those roles go down?
This is where systems and processes are key, right? Because if you've got a team and you've rolled out, you've created different systems and processes, one of them goes down, then someone else can step in. And one of the things when I was in the military as a paratrooper, we always used to train 2 ranks up. So if I was a private soldier and one of the corporals, took a round, everyone was able to step up to the next level and just carry on the mission. Mhm. So I'd always recommend that in business as well, try and know the next person's job up, because when Steve goes down, who's going to do his job? We need a system that's going to do that, whether it's an automated system or a manual system where someone can step in and trigger that automation or carry on that role. There
That's
needs to be a
actually
plan.
there's a guy by the name of Peter Drucker, and it used to be called the Peter Principle.
Okay.
The Peter Principle is that people were always promoted to their highest level of incompetence. And what you're saying is that needs to be really not engaged at all, because people need to be promoted to really 2 levels lower, at least probably 3 levels lower than their highest level of incompetence, because they need to be able to perform the task of 2 levels above should there be a pivot in the business. And if we look at any business, a small business, I own a mortgage business. So
Uh-huh.
what we're saying is that underwriter needs to be able to figure out, okay, well, can they do something that the originator is doing, or that fulfillment clerk needs to be able to underwrite in a pinch, or that underwriter needs to be able to do compliance, or any of these other rules within the business. Because should somebody get sick, or should somebody leave, or any of these things, you've got that immediate rollover into some other asset within the business, rather than having to go out and spend 6 months and recruit.
Yeah, I don't know the mortgage business, but I think, yes, absolutely. If someone goes down and you've got a team that you can utilize, I think it's having the trust, when you've got the systems and processes of onboarding people and they know their role, and you've got that onboarding process, right? So they learn that Steve goes away for a week, you can bring someone else in to fill that role or whatever. Or you've had someone in the team for a long time, they understand the atmospherics of the business, the personality of the business, so they're already there. And it's easy then to step up, right? I know what Shaun does. Shaun's going on holiday for a week or whatever it might be. Are they able to step up? Absolutely, because they've worked for me for X amount of years, or they've seen how I do things. They've been molded in your
So how do you
method.
convert that from I can step up in a pinch to doing that person's job to why do I have that person's job rather than my lowly job? The idea that they say, well, I could probably do a better job.
It's really interesting, actually. When I first became a self-employed, so when I came back from hostile environments, Iraq and Afghanistan, I remember working for a company as a contractor, as a bodyguard. And they used to call me when some really big clients come in. Shaun, can you be here at 2:00 in this dress at this place? Yeah, absolutely. Be there, turn up on time, look the part, do the job, task finished at the end. Well done, Shaun. That was great. Next time the client comes in, oh, we'd love Shaun again. So it came to a point where every time a new client came in, it was like, oh, we'll send Shaun because he looks the part, turns up, does the job. There was a number of people like that. But at that time in my life, I just had 2 kids and I wanted stability. I wanted to know what I was making every month. I was just at that point where I wanted that regular income. And when you were bouncing from job to job, task to task, you never, you could have months where you make some fortune, some months where not so much. And I remember when some good roles came up, and I said, but I'm happy to do that. And he said, no, I can't there's people coming in who never worked for the company and they would get them roles. And I was like, I don't understand what's happening here. And he said, as soon as I give you that position, then you're no longer available for all these other clients that come in. So it was becoming almost a victim of your own success. So what he said to me was, even though I didn't work for the company full time, he says, right, Shaun, there's an advanced driving course on next week. I want you to go down there to Hereford I'm paying for it and give me an invoice of X amount for all of the days that you're there. And I was like, wow, you're paying for me to do this training. You're paying for me to go on it. And I don't even work for you. And then happened again with a advanced medical course. And it made me want to run through walls because he looked after me, treated me well, all of that sort of thing. And I think that was a model I implemented within my business. So even though I had the different levels, you'd have team leaders and you'd have the troops on the ground as such, as I call them, the bodyguards or the residential security operators. They were all paid well, looked after well, and they had good terms and conditions. So nobody thought, I want this job, because it was a small team. I think soon you get a big, massive team and you start losing a bit of that intimacy that gets built within a team, right? But I think if you're treating your team well, looking after them, and they feel valued, I think it stops that striving because they're in, good terms and conditions already.
Yeah. Yeah, I think treating people well, it seems like such an easy thing to say, but I can guarantee it's something that is overlooked time and time again. And that, what you just showed was the idea that treating people well isn't about, hey, I'm going to make sure that you got a comfy chair, or I'm going to make sure that I say nice things to you in the morning, like, how's your day? But you're treating them well by producing opportunity for them and saying that, look, I'm going to give you this course that you can take. Let's see how you do. I'm going to give you this other course, and I don't have to do it, but I'm going to do it because I see something in you that's greater than where you are today. And I'm going to help you stay on that path to consistently improve yourself so that you're going to find bigger things in the future, because I need people in my business to do bigger things, because that's where our business is going. If you're growing as a business, your people have to grow too. And if you don't invest into them to help them grow, then you're really putting your business at a deficit, because now you're going to look external to try to find people. And we all know what happens when that happens and you go external. It's so much easier to promote from inside.
It's about knowing the personalities as well, right? Because once you know the personalities and you know how to the levers to get the most out of people, I've worked in the high net worth billionaire space for a number of years, and what I found is they always seem to have the right skill of the right amount of bonus to keep the people happy, in each of the positions. Some of them were life-changing ones, but they tie you in for a number of years where, Steve, really well done. We're going to give you this great amount. It's going to be spread over the next. So just kept you in. You were getting looked after. They were investing in you. But it was honestly a real skill. Just the amount was the right amount on every position. And I don't know how they do it, but it was
that's an interesting way of, bonus structure is so interesting, and how it can be done to be something that is motivating or demotivating depending on how you structure it. And absolutely something that can tie you to the future. That's why I know stock options are done for a lot of companies. Giving, preferred shares are done for a lot of companies to create that loyalty, so that, number one, people aren't looking to just get in and get out. But number two is they're all aligned to having a strategic vision for the business that is going to be way more successful than it is today. And I think that's a very complicated environment to design those things.
It is. It's a high intelligence for sure. But yeah, absolutely. I think if you look after your people and they'll look after you, it's something I've always lived by, and I've found it's worked well for me. And just take that back to when, whenever you've been an employee or something like that, you always remember the people that looked after you, right? Or the people that give you them opportunities. And that's the people that you wanted to run through walls for and wanted to help them grow the business, and that you would bring opportunity to pay back.
Absolutely. Now let's have a little bit of fun and talk about some mission stuff that is, a lot of people want to hear some stories. So we'll close off with a little bit of stories here, and then some just fun questions around it. Is when we look at the most interesting story that, movie worthy story that you might have had in security or as a paratrooper, what would be one of those stories?
So many working in, the high net worth space, because you see things that the average person doesn't get to see, the private jets, the super yachts, the individuals you're dealing with. But I think story worthy, in them hostile regions, lots of things around there. And one of the things that really opened my eyes when I left the military and got into the hostile space was I lost a really good friend of mine. I remember we were protecting a team of engineers that were picking up unexploded ordnance in Iraq. And I remember when it happened, they drove over a pressure plate, which destroyed the vehicle, injured one of the guys, and unfortunately my friend lost his life. And I remember pulling up the vehicle and he got out, and I was lying in the ditch with the doctor, and I was giving him oxygen, and the doctor was working on him. And then a secondary explosion went off, which was the other side of the vehicle, and that was the only thing that saved us, the vehicle in the way. And when that happened, because the team leader already called for support, there was a helicopter on the way from the US military, and we were civilians at the time. And at that point, we got the message the helicopter can't come because it's deemed as too hot because there was a secondary explosion. And eventually, the helicopter did come, but by this point, my friend had lost his life. And when there was a guy who was injured, we took him to the helicopter before we carried my friend's body out. And I still remember the loadmaster who stood in the door and he held out his arm. And he said, "I'm sorry, I can't take the body." Because, he's dead. They could take, the guy who was living because he's still alive and would provide care to him. But you aren't military, you are civilians. It's the responsibility of the company that you work for. And I just remember that hitting home like a hammer. I'm now not in the military, I'm a civilian. And that was my first task as a civilian. And think, God, you really are, on your own. And I remember we loaded a friend onto the back seat of our vehicle, and we drove back to the camp where we were staying. And I remember the big crowd of people waiting to receive us, and they gave us bottles of Gatorade. And all the American camps, that's what took bottles of Gatorade. And I drank this bottle, and it just disappeared straight down the throat. And gave me another one. It was just the adrenaline of your body just sucked in all of the, and it was just a weird experience. I remember just sitting there, you look at your hand, shaking. I was never afraid when I was in Iraq, Afghanistan, any of these places. I was excited to do the role that I was doing. And when I left, finally, when I had my second child, I remember being on a flight and I ordered a whiskey. And I didn't drink whiskey. I was going back for the birth of my second child. And I had a whiskey, and I'd made the conscious decision there and then that I'm not coming back. I'm going to make it happen back in the UK, start a business. I'm going to make it happen by hook or by crook. So I made that decision without having a job. I was coming back, second child, and then I ordered another whiskey. And it was just like this. Even though I feel like I didn't carry any fear when I was there. It's like the weight of the world just, coming out. I still had my arms, still had my legs, whereas, many of my friends didn't or weren't so lucky. So it was that point I realised you do carry something. It's how you compartmentalize it and switch it off. That's one of the skills I had. Just switch that off, because you're focused on the mission, on the job.
Yep.
And I'll deal with that later. And that later is, when I knew I wasn't coming back to that country. Now I'm doing a different role. I never knew I carried anything until that.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the processing of tough situations and how that happens. I think a lot of people who are in first responder roles, a lot of people in the military, private sector, security, there's a lot of processing that has to happen. And it's a lifetime, to be honest, of processing to get past a lot of the things that people have seen. And I have nothing but respect for people who are first line workers. I have nothing but respect for people who are in the military, because it's some of the hardest jobs, and all the rest of the population benefits from it for other people having to go through it. So first of all, thank you for your service. Second of all, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the program. Shaun, I know you've got your website, the shaunwest.co website, pretty easy to find. And guys, look him up. What a great person to have. I was thinking about, when we were talking the last time, I was thinking about, a lot of people want to get some activity happening in their office. And there was this Terry Tate video that came out so long ago. It was this football guy who'd come in the office and, tackle Doug because he didn't put the cover letter on his TPS form. And I think, Shaun, you're that guy going into the business, maybe not to necessarily tackle them or to, take them down or anything like that, but certainly to put some mission critical work into that business and put up the strategies and tactics. So, Shaun, it's been an absolute pleasure having you, my friend.
The pleasure's been all mine. And that Terry Tate advert, if you haven't watched it, you sent me it before, and it's an absolutely cracking one.
Man, it's the best. I mean, I played rugby for like a long time, and so I love a good tackle, and man, can that guy throw down.
Yeah.
Guys, this is the money. This is the mindset. This is the mentoring podcast. We'll see you on the next one.